Welcome to the Demeere podcast. We talk about martial arts, self-defense, and a whole lot more. And now your host, Demeere.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode 46, in which we're going to talk about first a quick update, and then I'll talk a little bit about the coronavirus and what you can do to keep yourself safe while the world is pretty much spinning out of control around you. So first things first, a quick shout out to one of my patrons, Donna Altina. Donna's been with me for well over a year now, and it's thanks to her support and that of all my other patrons, you guys know who you are, that I can do this podcast and my blog and everything else. So I wanted to say thank you to you, Donna, for supporting me. I hope you enjoy everything that we've got going on Patreon so far. There's a lot more to come, and the next topic is going to cover that in a little bit. So if you guys want to support the show, want to support my work, that would be awesome. Just go to patreon.com/Wim Demeere, my name. Link is in the show notes. If you can't find it, that's fine. And you can go there and see everything that we have available there. It's pretty much a membership site by now with tons and tons of video content and much more, newsletter, a bunch of stuff. You can join up. Lowest tier is $3, which is a month, so that's not a lot. And there's quite a bunch of content for you to consume already, because this is the 4th year that I'm doing this on Patreon, which is mind blowing to me. That this is year 4. It's crazy how fast time goes. Anyway, thank you, Donna. Thanks for the support. Everybody else, same thing. And before I go on, I have to mention this first. So all the show notes for this episode is, you can find that at wimsblog.com/46, number 46, before I forget to mention that. So that out of the way, what's the update? Well, the big update is that I'm working on my next book, and it isn't the one that I thought I was going to do, but it is what it is. So I'll give you a little bit of a background first. So a while ago, my Boxing for Self-Defense book came out. That was November last year. And a huge shout out and also thank you to all of you who bought it, because the book is done quite well. And a lot of people are buying it, and I've got a lot of positive feedback. So that's always really heartwarming for me. I got an email a few days ago from Jason from Canada, I think, and he just wanted to send me a quick note that hey, I really loved your book and I enjoyed it a lot, and just wanted to reach out and say that. So thank you, Jason. And I mentioned it to him, and I figured okay, I'm going to mention it to everybody else. Here's the thing. So the boxing book was difficult to write for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to go over that again. I've done that several times in the past already. One of the results of that is that I had some material that I had to cut from the book, and I didn't. I couldn't really use it because it didn't fit in the book, and the whole structure of the 3-volume series. So there's going to be 3 books. First one is Boxing for Self-Defense is out. Second one is Boxing for Self-Defense, and that's going to cover all the illegal blows that are outlawed in boxing, but actually work quite well for self-defense. And the third one is going to be, it's going to be some additional stuff that you're also going to need on how to actually apply the things you can learn in the ring and how to apply that in the street. So that's the whole point. So I had this idea of 3 books. Well, me being me, I didn't want to throw away all the stuff that I had already written for the first book, but that didn't fit anymore. So I cut it out, kept it in a separate file, and then I figured okay, I can do something with it. And my idea was to combine it with a bunch of additional pictures that I took for the first book, but I never used those for a variety of reasons. They didn't fit, or I had other pictures that worked better, and so on. A photo shoot, I think I shot about 400 or 500 pictures for that book, and I used, I think, about 150. So that's a lot. That's a lot of additional pictures, and a lot of them just, again, they didn't end up being useful for the first book. So I said, right, I'm going to combine the cut material from the first one and those pictures and make it a fun little bonus book for my patrons. And I started doing that. And very quickly I realized, well, okay, this is okay, but it's not as good as it could be. So I began to brainstorm a little bit and figured out a way that I could make it actually better. And the whole idea of that bonus book is now, the title is Boxing for Self-Defense Bonus Book, Training Guide for Using Combinations. So that was one of the chapters that I cut out, how to use combinations, which is one of the hallmarks of a good boxer, is that he doesn't know to throw just one punch, but he can use combinations and well thought out combinations, the combinations that you put together correctly. You get to the old cliche of the sum being more than just adding up all the separate parts. So it becomes something bigger than just what the separate parts seem to bring to the table. And that is, I mean, typically the hallmark of a good boxer is that it's not just one punch, is that he hits you with one punch and then the next one and the next one and the next one. It just keeps on hitting you until you're down, because he thinks in combinations, which is a huge difference with many other arts where they tend to think in isolated techniques. Again, I'm speaking in general, but this is one of the critical traits of boxing. And I said, right, let me do something with that. And I started writing. And very quickly I realized that, well, okay, this is getting out of control again. So just to give you an idea, I'm at 8,000 words right now, and I'm not done just yet. So there's a lot more to come. The result is that it's going to be not as big as the first book. I don't have a word count in mind because it's hard to predict, because it's going to be in part a picture book, in a sense that I'm going to add pictures and then describe what is there, as opposed to normally doing it vice versa, in which I make the text first and then shoot the pictures. So now it's a little bit different. And when you get the book, it'll make sense why I'm doing it that way. So that's what's going on right now. That's been taking up pretty much all of my writing time. It took, again, a little bit of figuring out which way I wanted to go with that book, but now I've got a really good grasp on it, and I think everybody will be happy with it. So my original idea was, I'm going to do this as a bonus for my patrons. So all of my patrons are going to get this for free. So if you're not a patron yet, that might be a good incentive for you to join. And the Founding 50 get the deluxe version of this book. So what is the Founding 50? Well, a while ago, I did this special thing, and it was like the first 50 patrons would become part of this mythical group, the Founding 50. And they keep getting surprise perks and special treatment for being there from the beginning, and just to thank them for their continued support. Because it's not evident to me that somebody supports you for years and years on end. So I wanted to do something special for the people who were there from the very first day and kept with me for all these years. So they're going to get a special version, which will have additional content that, I'm sorry to say, nobody else is going to get. So, and you cannot become a member of the Founding 50. That's too late. That ship has sailed. You could do that I think it's 2 years ago. That we started with that, and everybody who's in Founding 50, you're in. If you're not, I'm so sorry, but you missed your chance. Should have been there sooner. So that's what's going on right now, and I don't know when exactly I will be able to finish the book. There's a lot of stuff going on outside of my writing, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So if you want to get the book for free, become a patron. You go to patreon.com/Demeere. And once the book is done, I'm going to send it to you. It's going to be an ebook. It's not going to be in print, as far as I know. But the interesting part for everybody else is that I will offer the version that my patrons get, not the deluxe version. That's for the Founding 50 patrons. But the regular version, I will publish that eventually. So that will be available as an ebook. And if you want to be notified when that one goes live, easiest thing to do is just go to my main page, and you go to wimdemeere.com/notification. And that brings you to a page where you can sign up for my email list that I send a handful of emails every year. It's not much, so there's no spam. It's just like, hey, I've got a new book coming out. If you want to buy it, here it is at a special introductory price. Or, hey, I'm doing a promo. All my books are, 25% off for the next 2 days and stuff like that. So if you get more than 5 mails a year from that notification list, that's a lot. Then that means I've got a bunch of stuff that I published, which is great, but that's the exception and that's not the rule. So all that said, let's move to the main topic of this podcast, the coronavirus. Now, I did 2 videos on that on Patreon a few weeks ago. Also, I'll put links in the show notes. When it was dawning in my head, basically, that, okay, this is more than what I thought it would be. At first, I thought it looked like some sort of flu. And that was what I was reading and hearing about. Is that, okay, it looks like some sort of flu here. That is more infectious than a regular flu, but the symptoms seem to be the same. And other than that, I wasn't that much aware of it, but I kept track. And increasingly, I noticed that, okay, this is not a regular flu. There's more going on here. So I'm not going to talk too much about medical stuff, but I will tell you some of the things that I think are important to know. I'll put a link to those 2 videos on Patreon in the show notes so you can watch that. But I'll try to give you the main gist of everything that has been going through my mind here. And I'm mainly going to talk about safety and self-defense and so on in the times that are coming on, for us now. I'm guessing pretty much everybody in the world is going to go through this because it's officially a pandemic now. So we're not going to be able to hide from this one. I'm going to set this up with what we know and then give you my thoughts on it and mainly why that I think things will go the way they go. So first, what do we know about the coronavirus so far? Now, I'm going to give you a qualifier. This is all information that I sourced from government websites over here and abroad, and public statements from virologists and epidemiologists and all sorts of professionals that are working on the issue right now, that are being interviewed, and I'm mainly focusing on people who work for the government as opposed to somebody who has a book to sell or a product to sell. Because as always, caveat emptor, so you have to be careful what you buy. You have to be careful who you listen to. So I mainly focused on official sources. Now, that said, anything I will say after this point, you have to understand there's a lot we don't know, and we won't know it for a long time to come. Because it's very, very early days. So there's a lot of information we either don't know or are not sure about. So we have to be honest. Whenever you talk about that, you cannot state it like dogmatic, like, oh, this is how it is and there's no other way. No, that's not how this stuff works. In a year's time or in 2 years' time, a lot more will be known, and we will probably notice that some of the things we said in the beginning were wrong. So that's just how life works. That's it. What does it look like? Well, it looks like it's highly contagious and it has flu-like symptoms, like coughing, having a fever, and so on. But it's a lot more contagious, apparently, than a regular flu. So that's why I'm saying flu-like symptoms, and I'm not comparing it directly to the flu, just comparing it to something that people understand better. It's apparently transmitted via human contact, most likely saliva and small drops. Now, what does that mean? Well, somebody coughs or sneezes, and then a bunch of small drops will go flying through the air, and they contain the virus. Now, you can be affected and not have any symptoms, apparently. However, at that stage, it's already possible that you infect other people. So you're not feeling anything, but you might actually be carrying the virus already. Now, we don't know how high the likelihood of that is. That's one of the issues. But we do know that it's possible, apparently. So, another issue. The virus can survive for a certain time, and we don't exactly know how long, on certain surfaces. For instance, like doorknobs. That means somebody sneezes, and those little droplets that contain the virus fall on it. You don't see it, obviously. You don't look at stuff like that under a microscope as you're going about your day. But if you touch that surface, obviously, you will be carrying that virus with you. Doesn't mean that you're infected right away. It means that you have it on you. And one of the things that people instinctively do, the last stat that I saw about that is that we touch our face about 90 times. What is it? was it a day? I'm not quite sure anymore. Anyway, we subconsciously touch our face a lot. So if you've got a virus on your hand because you picked it up somewhere like that, touching doorknobs or in a public place or whatever, and then you're just poking that booger out of your nose, so to speak, well, you're likely just infected yourself. So I'll talk a little bit more about what we can do to prevent, obviously, these kind of things. But first, what else do we know? Well, it seems to affect the elderly at a higher rate. However, that doesn't mean that younger people cannot get sick. Quite on the contrary, there are cases already apparently of people affected by the coronavirus who are under 40. And the last thing I saw was like early 20s as well. So it's not like they can't, that if you're younger than, let's say, 50, that you cannot get it. It's just that it seems to affect the elderly much, much more than a younger population. That brings us to another point, which is related. Your overall health and medical status is also a factor. So if you have a respiratory illness or other issues like that, if you have medical problems that weaken you, like diabetes, cancer, etc., then you are more at risk. Now, obviously, the older we get, the more likely we are to have some of those illnesses and issues. So that clearly seems to be correlated to the elderly getting affected by the virus at such a high rate. But again, just because you're younger doesn't mean you're safe. That's not how it works. Now, here's a main issue at this stage. Because it's a new virus, there is no vaccine and there are no known drugs that we can take. There is stuff in the pipeline, but that doesn't help us right now. There's a lot of tests going on with available drugs, but it's also very early days on that front as well. You have to understand that it broke out, as far as we know, in December of last year in China. And I mean, that when it comes to creating drugs and so on and vaccines, a few months it's nothing. It takes much more time than that. It's not as easy as people make it sound sometimes. So and that's what scares a lot of people right now, is that there's no cure, it's new, there's no vaccine. It's like it's new and it's scary. But here's the thing, if you look at the common flu, we have vaccines for that. And over here, where I live, less than 50% of the people who should get it, because they are in the population that is at risk, less than 50% of the people do it. So, and the common flu can kill you just as dead as the coronavirus can if you are in that at-risk population. So why doesn't everybody get it? Well, there's the habituation effect. It's like, okay, flu comes back every year. It's flu season. We know technically a bunch of people die from that. But, it's a flu. You get it and you get better and that's it. Well, some people don't. And it's going to be very similar to the coronavirus in that regard, is that some people do get better. Some people don't. We don't know what the percentages are, and that's the next thing I want to mention. So mortality rate is unknown. So basically, mortality rate, it means, if I simplify a bit, is how many people are going to die from this. Now, one of the main issues is that you can only truly measure that once the whole pandemic is over. Now, I looked this up, and this morning, and the figure is no longer accurate, because there's a new figure with the number of infections and the number of deceased patients that came out of Italy right before I started recording this, but I couldn't verify it, so I didn't want to include it. But as this morning, before I recorded this, there were, out of about 10,000 infections in Italy, there were 6 out of 100 patients who died from coronavirus. But in South Korea, with about 7,500 infections, that number is only 1 in 100, which is much closer to like a regular flu. So my point is that it's impossible to make a definitive claim right now. We don't have all the statistics. And of the statistics we do have, we don't know how trustworthy every single one of them is. And at this stage, we don't know how many people are infected, because like I said, you can have the virus and not have any symptoms. And you could be infecting a bunch of other people at the same time. So who knows? It's too early to give definitive statements on that regard. So if some people are claiming that, well, corona, it's not a big deal, it's just like a flu, it's going to go away, I think that's wrong. But it's also wrong to claim that it's the end of the world as we know it. At this stage, we have no idea. We don't know what the final mortality rate will be. It could be much, much higher than expected. It could be lower than expected. We don't know. That said, from what it looks like, it is something that you need to take very serious for a bunch of other reasons. And that's pretty much what this podcast is about. So, all that fun and awesome news that I just delivered to you. Okay, what can you do about it? What can you do to spread the virus? Again, from as far as we know, the main mindset you need to have is that it's about improving your odds of not getting infected and spreading it further. That's the goal. But you have to accept that this is for a large part out of your control, because it is a very highly infectious virus, and as it's new, nobody has antibodies, so we're all at risk basically. So, for instance, this is one of the virologists here has talked about that. He says, look, people aren't really that afraid of the flu because most of us here have had it, so we have some antibodies in our system that can handle it. And even if it's the new strain of the flu that hits us, well, there is usually some overlap between the previous ones. So your defense, your immune system, your defense system actually has some experience dealing with the common flu. But this new one here, this coronavirus, it's something else. It is new, so your body doesn't know how to handle it. And that's a very different situation. I'm going to bring something up, and don't freak out when I say it, but Chancellor Merkel of Germany recently said that they expect up to 70% of the population will be infected by the virus in Germany. Now, 70%, that is a scary number. Now, and this is how the news works. This is, it's gotta get some headlines. Got to sell those papers, got to get people to read your stuff on the internet. So they put out this quote, and that's the headline, and everybody freaks out. But I haven't seen the full segment of her saying that, because they, again, on the news as well, they snipped that, whatever she said before or after. So there's no context. Okay, I'll give you some context. As per the words of one of the virologists who over here in Belgium is working with the government to handle the situation. He says, right, a huge part of the population that is infected will feel nothing. They won't have any symptoms, and they won't feel anything. It won't change their daily lives at all. A significant part of the infected will become very lightly sick. It'll be a mild case of the flu or a cold or some, cold-like symptoms, and put it that way. And then an even smaller part will actually get quite sick. A smaller part than that will actually be that sick that they need to be hospitalized. And a smaller part of that population will not make it. So when you see that 70% figure thrown at you, that is something that you have to keep in mind. That is, again, newspapers and news outlets, they love to throw that stuff around so that you panic and that you feel horrible about it, so that you click on the article and they get to sell you some more ads, or you buy the newspaper. That's the whole point of a headline, but the context is often missing. And a lot of people don't read the context. They just read the headline and they freak out. So don't do that. And I'll talk a little bit more about freaking out in a little bit. So that is the mindset that you need to have, is that you want to improve your odds to not get infected and spread the virus. But you have to understand that you can't control this 100%. That is simply not how the world works. Now, one of the main things that they've been talking about here is social distancing. So that's basically you keep away from other people. Now, the general rule is that you try to keep about 5 feet away. That's 1.5 meters for us Euro people. Try to keep about 5 feet away from other people whenever possible. And I stress the last part, whenever possible. Like you try to obviously avoid situations where you're packed together with a bunch of other people, because that is how the virus can spread. If somebody coughs or breathes and so on too close to you, and you inhale the virus that way, well, then it's in you. But they need to be close enough to do that. If you can keep your distance, that is fine. But you also have to accept that that isn't always possible. There are many situations in which that you won't be able to prevent from being that close to people. There's a difference between that and then going all over the place to search out those situations where you're just jam-packed with a bunch of other people in a small room. A lot of people do stupid stuff. I mean, I just saw this video of, I think it was an NBA player who was not at all concerned about the coronavirus and that it was all this big hoax. Not this hoax, but it was like exaggerated and this and that. And after an interview, he made it a point to touch, all the microphones that were there at the press conference. And it turned out that he got coronavirus. So now I'm not saying he contracted it from touching those microphones. It's just that it's stupid. That is stupid behavior. You win no points for doing this kind of stupid stuff. So that is more the idea, is that if you can avoid being this closely packed to other people, well, avoid it. If you can't, accept it and then try to get away whenever is reasonably possible. And then we get to a big one: wash your hands. Wash your hands, guys. Do it a lot. Do it often. Do it so many times that you get sick of it, but just do it anyway. Now, from what we know, regular soap and water seems to work just fine. Apparently, liquid soap is best. I didn't know that, but apparently liquid soap is the go-to. Be thorough. So you spend at least 30 seconds washing your hands. Doesn't have to be 30 minutes. That's overkill. But about 30 seconds on washing your hands is apparently all you need for it to be effective. And a good rule of thumb is that sing the happy birthday song to yourself. That's going to take you about 30 seconds. And in the meantime, wash your hands, front to back, in between the fingers, and so on. I mean, you can look up how to wash your hands effectively, and so on. And you'll find a truckload of information about that on the internet. It's not difficult. You just have to see it once, and then you know it. If you're not sure, ask a nurse, ask a doctor, ask somebody who does that for a living. But do that, because that's going to get the virus off your hands, and your hands is, well, that's one of the ways that you're going to spread it if you contracted it somehow. That's going to affect you, if you touch the surface where the virus is on, and then you start picking your nose and trying to get rid of that little piece of spinach between your teeth. All of a sudden you've got it. So that's something you want to avoid. So wash your hands. Now, correlated to that, and this is more difficult, but don't touch everything in public places. So the virus can be transmitted via surface contact. Now, here's a fun stat for you. I forget where I heard this one, but I think it was a study that was done not that long ago. And it says that 70% of people in airports do not wash their hands after going to the bathroom. That is a lot of dirty people. That's thousands and thousands of people every day in the airport touching surfaces all over the place. So just imagine the bacteria and the viruses that they leave behind. And when you put your hand on something over there at the airport, well, it's on your hands now. Now, apply the same logic to all public places and surfaces. And you'll see that just not putting your hands anywhere you want is actually a good thing in this case. Another thing, if you have to cough or sneeze, if you can, do that in a paper tissue and then throw it in the trash. If you can't, do it in your sleeve or your elbow, and then go wash your hands. That should be common practice. Again, it's about not spreading the virus if you have it. And remember, you might not feel a thing. You might have 0 symptoms, but you might be a carrier of the virus. So try to avoid that. And we'll get to why it's important that you don't only think about yourself. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, if you're sick, just contact your doctor and try to stay away from other people. So that's basically a self-quarantine. For instance, here in Belgium now, as of today, doctors have the the standard practice now is that if somebody calls with cold symptoms, they tell you to stay home for 7 days. So at this stage, you don't even they ask you to not come in to the waiting rooms, because then everybody gets sick if you have the virus, and you just call, hey, I've got a runny nose, I've got this, I've got that. So like cold-like symptoms, stay home for 7 days. Stay away from other people. If you're not out and about in the world, getting into contact with other people, you can't really infect them. So that makes sense. Now, here's a big one. Prevention. What can you do to prevent this? Well, it's not going to be something that you'll love me telling you, because there's no magic wand. There's no secret sauce. It's just try to live a healthy lifestyle. Recently on Joe Rogan, there was this virologist, and he said, look, just eat healthily, drink lots of water, get plenty of sleep, manage your stress. And that may be difficult in these times, but try to be healthy. Basically be as healthy as you can be so your immune system works well. Now, for instance, we know that if you don't get enough sleep, your immune system tends to suffer. So get enough sleep. We know that, if you're overweight, that makes you vulnerable. If you're smoking, that makes you vulnerable. Well, try to lose some weight, stop smoking. This is maybe the best reason that you might have to stop smoking when this incredibly dangerous pulmonary virus that attacks your pulmonary system is on the loose, rampant in society, and people are dropping dead from it. You might want to consider giving your lungs a break. And for those who don't know, if you stop smoking right now, your lungs will actually start cleaning themselves out, and very rapidly you will improve your lung capacity. It doesn't take years on end. It takes a long time to get the last of all that crap out of your system, but very, very quickly, with each breath you take, your lungs will start to actually begin getting rid of all the problems that you caused by smoking. So maybe now is a good time to stop. Now, talking about prevention, there's going to be a lot of nonsense products that will be for sale. Don't waste your money on that kind of stuff. You might need it later. I'll also mention that in a little bit. There will be a lot of crap that people will tell you, like, hey, buy this, buy that. No, just don't. That's not how it works. Try to live healthy. Try to be healthy. And don't trust people who try to sell you this magic bullet that will get rid of it right away. That's if that would be something that works, you can be sure that every government in the world would be all over it, but it doesn't. So that is the first part that I wanted to mention. So, and then we get to the crucial part. What can we expect next? Now, every country is different. It depends on a number of factors. But what we're seeing right now is that you can expect in pretty much any country that large parts of the population will be infected. Now, it's like I said, a huge part of the people who are infected, they won't know because they won't have any symptoms. And the other ones will have minor symptoms that you might actually think, well, I've just got a cold and it's over. And if you don't get tested or you can't get tested, well, you might be spreading the virus and not really feel bad and not think much about it. So the whole point is that this has the risk, because it's such an infectious virus, that huge part of the population will be infected too, and that is going to affect how society works. So you can expect that there's going to be very big disruptions in the way daily life goes on in our societies, and this is already happening here in Europe, and I'm just talking about my country. Events are being cancelled. In other countries, shops are being closed already. So that means that there's a high likelihood of a scarcity of goods and services. Supermarkets, they are at risk of being with limited stock or even getting emptied out. Now, right now, where I live, this is not yet an issue, but it can be. For instance, hoarding. People hoard. It's happening right now. So I did my shopping several weeks ago. About 3 weeks ago, my girlfriend and I, we did some shopping. We didn't talk about it. Didn't make a big deal out of it. But we did just some Just make sure we had enough of stuff that can stay good for a long time, that has a long expiration date, and that we eat anyway. So we just got more of it. And we made sure that we are stocked up on some other things that might be difficult to get. Nothing fancy, nothing special, just things that help you, live your life like you normally would. And that's it. That's what we did. But right now, she went to the store to go do groceries for somebody else. And it's Thursday evening here. And she said that she called me afterwards. She called me before and she called me after. And before she said the parking lot is just jam-packed. Normally on a Thursday night, there's like almost nobody here in this store. And it's just the whole parking lot is full. And I said, okay, go do your thing, but be careful, this and that. So she came out, she called me back, and she said like it was crazy. It was just insanity. Everybody was hoarding. Toilet paper gone, milk gone, flour gone, all the essentials gone. And it was almost like you had to queue in the aisles to wait your turn to get to whatever you needed on certain shelves, because everybody was trying to get it. And she said that the whole atmosphere was pretty tense. People were getting rude and no fighting yet, but it wasn't really a fun time doing some shopping. So hoarding is going to happen. Now I just read a few hours ago, I read the articles here online that the distribution centers here said, hey, supermarkets are going to be fine. We are stocked full. We can deliver everything that the supermarket needs. If you see empty spots on the shelves, it's because the personnel doesn't have the time to fill up everything again, but we're good. You don't need to hoard. Obviously, nobody's listening, but that is something that you can expect. If it's not happening already wherever you live, you can expect that to happen. And now we get to a really big one. Medical infrastructure is going to be tested to the maximum, and it might even break. And that is my biggest concern. So here's the thing. There are only so many hospital beds, ventilators, doctors, nurses, and so on. So there's not a shelf somewhere with a box where you can just open that box and pull out some more hospital beds or a bunch more doctors. That's not how it works. So all that means that wherever you live doesn't matter, no matter what kind of modern society you live in, there's a maximum number of patients a country can handle. Now that capacity can be ramped up a little bit, and for instance, over here, hospitals have been working on that for the past few weeks. But it's not an instantaneous process, and it can't go on indefinitely. There is a limit. Well, that means that once that limit is hit and still more patients come in, the system cannot handle it. And that means that people will not get the care they need. And then triage starts. Now, if you don't know what triage is basically when the doctors decide, like, right, I've got 10 beds, I've got 20 patients, who gets the bed? And then they're going to decide who needs it the most. And if you don't need it the most, you don't get that bed. I'm oversimplifying, but that's basically what it boils down to. Because they have to make choices. That is the job at that point. So that is going to be one thing. Another thing, which is perhaps even more important, the coronavirus didn't come with a pause button for all the other injuries and illnesses that are happening in the world right now. So the whole point is that if it's going to be all hands on deck in the hospitals because so many patients come in with corona, well, everybody else who is sick or gets injured, they still need care. Corona doesn't make that go away. And in fact, it's going to make it worse for people who are already vulnerable or in need. So that is a key factor of the medical infrastructure, is that you do not want to overly stress it. And I'll talk a little bit about some more. But first, just this morning, I was training a client who had a friend in Italy. And if you don't know what's going on in Italy, I highly suggest you look it up. And he has a friend who's a doctor there, who's also married to a doctor, and sent him this message that it's horrible over here. Is that we're just having to turn people away and just like, all right, we can help you. People who have corona, people who are sick, and in desperate need of care and medical attention, and you just have to like, okay, go over there. We can help you. And I've been able to check up on some things and see that in many cases, there's plenty of other sources who can confirm this, is that in Italy, that's why the country has pretty much been on lockdown for a few days now, is that they didn't take it seriously at first, and now they just got overwhelmed, and the whole infrastructure cannot cope, cannot handle it. Just to give you guys an idea of the measures that are being taken, last I heard is that if you break the quarantine laws, you get a 3 months sentence in jail. So it's taken very, very seriously right now. Now, obviously, people will be people, but the point is that at a certain point, the medical infrastructures cannot cope with an influx that is too high. If there's more people coming in than they can handle, eventually the system cannot handle it. We do not want to end up in that position. Now, every country is different. That is also something else. Every country handles it differently and so on. The whole point of what you want to do, and this has been explained many, many times, if you've been watching the news, and just yesterday I saw it again with the virologist talking, one of the main reasons why we take these drastic measures of trying to avoid contagion is that we want to avoid to have a peak. Now, right now, for instance, Belgium is, from what I've seen, one of the countries in which every 2 days the number of infected doubles. So every 2 days, twice as many people get infected. Now, we are right now, if I'm not mistaken, we're at about, was it 300 or 400? I forget. This weekend, it was about 200 people. And I think we're now at 300 plus. I haven't been able to check since I've been recording this. So we're going to be easily at 600 this weekend. Give it a few more days, it's going to be about 1,200, 1,300. And that keeps on doubling unless drastic action is taken. And that's the whole point. If it can keep on spreading at exponential rates, then the hospitals will not be able to keep up. And then everybody else suffers as well. And that is the main reason why you are also responsible for yourself. If you have nobody else, that's fine. You don't want to be sick, but you don't want to make other people sick as well. Because if something happens to you, you break your leg, you get into a car accident, whatever, it could be something silly, but you need medical attention, well, you won't get it because too many people are sick with corona and the hospitals and the doctors cannot handle it. So that is a worst case scenario. You want to avoid that. And that is why it's pretty much a responsibility everybody has to take and try to not make it worse. And if you don't do it for yourself, I can almost guarantee you that there is somebody that you know and perhaps love who is actually already sick or vulnerable, who actually might need that care and might not get it because of the selfishness of some people. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So all the bad news delivered. So what's going on now? What do we do now? What are some safety tips, Wim? Well, let's start with staying calm because panic doesn't help. And you can view panic also as a virus because it spreads and people take it on and they just run with it. So panic will not help you. Now this too shall pass, as the phrase goes, but it's going to suck for a while. So you stay calm, you stay an adult, and you act accordingly. And that is difficult. That's also why it's called being an adult. So panic is going to make everything worse, but trying to remain calm and composed, if not for yourself, do it for other people. That is going to be a key issue in the weeks and months to come, and it's going to be difficult. Next thing, what can you do? Well, like I said, don't stress the system. Don't go to the hospital if you don't need it, because that's going to make everything worse, and that there will, in worst case scenarios, people actually start fighting over hospital spaces. So you do not want to end up in that situation. So don't go there if you don't need it. Now, a key safety tip is if you panic, you're going to stress yourself out. Now, that can cause you to make mistakes, or at the very least, it will burn you out in the long run. Now, from everything that I've seen, from everything that I've heard from the experts and so on, this whole situation is likely to take months before it goes away. So you cannot afford to burn out, because you might actually need to be on your game for a long, long time. So if you let yourself panic, then nothing good can come of that. It's going to make everything worse for yourself, for the people around you, for the people you care about, and for the people who care about you. So try to stay composed. And then we get to a really difficult one. I'm going to give a couple of examples to illustrate that one, because I've noticed that very few people, well, no, I can't say that. I noticed that a lot of people don't see this issue for what it truly is. One of the key things I think you can expect is financial problems to affect your life and that of other people. If not for you, that is so awesome. I'm happy for you, but expect it to affect the lives of people around you. Because the economical impact is going to be big. I mean, for just give you an indication, today, Belgium had the worst stock market day ever. I think we did minus 15 or minus 14% on one day. It's huge. So that means that millions and millions of euros just evaporated in one day. The reason I want to explain this is because a lot of people don't know actually how the world works nowadays. I'm going to go about it in a little bit of a roundabout way. For her 18th birthday, I took my daughter out for a day and we did a bunch of stuff. I wrote about that in my Patreon newsletter. And I decided that I'm going to make a post on my blog about it as an article, so you guys can read it as well. And you might find it interesting in this context. The whole point, one of the reasons why I went to the harbor of Antwerp with her, is that I wanted to show her how a global economy works, how everything is interconnected. And you can look that up. Look up the harbor of Antwerp in Google Maps. It's huge. It is bigger than the city of Antwerp. And there's tens of thousands of people who work there. There are huge companies that are located there, petrochemical, but so much more. One of the things I told my daughter is that whatever you think about capitalism, whatever you think about how the world should work, you're going to have to find an answer for this question. What if you take this away? How do you replace it? If you hate whatever this monster has become, it's fine, you can do that. But before you break it down, you're going to have to find an answer for everything you see around here. And we drove for 10-15 minutes into the harbor, and that's nothing compared to how much further you can go. And everywhere she looked, she could see all that infrastructure, all the big companies, and all the things that we're doing there, and that is needed for just society to function. And that is one of the things that people don't really understand, how huge the machine is that drives our modern lifestyles, that we just take for granted, that it's always going to be there, it's just going to be fine, there's never going to be an issue. Well, here's the thing, all that is interconnected. A few examples. So one of my students, he worked for a huge company, a multinational, that has a bunch of factories in China, I think about 15. And he's been going there for years now, very regularly to China. And in January, we talked about it when the coronavirus wasn't really that big a deal, I thought. So I said, "Hey, dude, aren't you infected?" He says, "No, I've been home for 2 weeks and nothing, blah, blah, blah." And we talked a little bit about it. And he said, "Look, one of the issues is that what many people do is, what many companies do is at the end of the year, they try to sell off as much stock as they possibly can, so they can make their they can make their numbers look great when they close off the fiscal year, and they can present that to the shareholders." So that's what happened. A lot of companies try to get rid of their stock, and then all of a sudden in December, the coronavirus starts to hit, and bit by bit, factories in China started to close down. So that meant that the stock was not replenished. But in the meantime, the orders are still coming in. So all the companies that wanted to order from those manufacturers in China, they got the message like, well, can't help you because we're closed down. Nothing is coming in for X amount of time. How long? Nobody knows. And that is one of the key issues. And all that has been working its way through the production chain of I'm not going to say every single industry, but a lot of them. So many that it is going to affect our lives. For instance, I bought a new car. I still don't have it. I was supposed to get it mid-February. I don't have it. And the people at Hyundai, they said, yeah, Paul, it's going to be there because it's ready to be made and so on. It'll be here in February. And all of a sudden it was like end of February. And then it was, well, it's going to be the 16th and I still don't have it. I started doing some searching and mine gets made in a factory in the Czech Republic. I know they did a lot of restructuring there because of a new line of cars they're going to make. But when I started looking deeper, I saw that at the beginning of February, one of the suppliers of Hyundai in China had stopped furnishing parts. So they couldn't get the parts they needed. That meant that the whole production line grinds to a halt. So a little bit later, there was in Korea at Hyundai at one of the big plants, somebody got the coronavirus. They shut it down as well. Now, they haven't communicated here in Belgium, but they did communicate to, for instance, Australia. They communicated to the car dealerships there, like, hey, tell your clients it's going to be delays, it's going to be months of delays because we can't make the cars. Well, that is one example. I'll give you another one. There's a company here that sells furniture, and they sell kind of like these lounge chairs. That have like a motorized unit that you can put the back up higher and lower and so on. And it's got this little remote and these buttons on the side that you can use to put the chair in the right position. Well, the company that makes them is in a lot of trouble right now because everything they need to make the chair is there except for the computer chip that runs those buttons that change the angle of the backrest and so on. And that computer chip comes from China and it's not coming in. Now, and this is happening throughout the world in all sorts of industries and so on. And this is how the world has been going for a long time, is that many companies are now finding out that even though they thought that they weren't working with Chinese companies, that actually one of their contractors has a subcontractor who maybe also has a subcontractor who is located in China, and that plant is shut down because of coronavirus. And all of a sudden, things grind to a halt. I'll give you one more example. One of my clients does a lot of events. He says a bunch of events get canceled, loads and loads, has a huge impact on hotels, restaurants, because people aren't showing up. They have reservations, they cancel, hotels are empty, restaurants, people don't go out. Air carriers, the flights get canceled. There are a bunch of flights here in Belgium that several companies have said, like, right, cancel the flights, 20% less flights, 30% less flights, and so on. I know of at least one air carrier who went bankrupt, who already was in dire straits, and they didn't make it. That was just the last straw. Now, and that is the other point. You can expect many bankruptcies. A lot of people will be out of a job. A lot of people will be struggling. And most of all, you can expect this to carry through for months to come and probably also into next year. And that is why I gave you just that explanation of how everything is interconnected, because a bunch of companies might have enough cash right now to keep the cash flow going and keep operations going as they are. And if everything picks up, they might be fine, but you can be sure that a bunch of companies will not have the cash flow and will basically be going to banks for loans. And when they don't get them, that's it, done, bankrupt, game over. Now, this is likely a process that will take a very long time for a lot of companies but they might not make it in the end. And other companies that are already just hanging on by the skin of their teeth, that just like a week or two from now might be too late for them. Again, nobody knows how long this is going to last. Nobody knows how drastic the measures will be that will be taken by all the governments, not just where you live, but also in other countries. And as all the industries are now pretty much interconnected, what happens in another country might be very relevant to what your job is. So this is one of the things that is going to be on our minds for a long time, and we will only see the ripple effects for a long time to come. I'm not saying this to scare everybody. This is the things that I hear from clients, from consultants, from people who are actually well aware of how business works in 2020, and this is what they're telling me, and I think they're right. Now, all this combined, what does that mean for societies? Well, the general stress level is going to go up like a lot. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of fear. Now, people in general have a hard time accepting things that they cannot control. And that means that they become irrational and very often egotistical because they go into survival mode. I'll give you another story. One of my students works in a big hospital here in Belgium. And a few weeks ago, I said, how's things going? And this and that. And he says, oh, well, there was this couple that came into the emergency, right? So in the emergency. And the woman wasn't feeling all that great. And what happened? Well, he's doing the checkup and so on. And after a while, the husband says like, hey, I feel like I have to say something. A little while ago, we had people from China over for dinner. And then the woman gets angry at her husband because he's like, oh, don't say that because they're going to put me in quarantine and this and that. Well, here's the thing. They have been sitting in the ER for a while. How many people have passed in front of them? What have they touched and so on? If she had a cough, she didn't have a cough, was she sneezing? I mean, she could have infected that whole hospital. Now, it wasn't the case. He told me afterwards, but it could have happened if she were positive. So this is how people think. They start to think about themselves, and just her reaction of like, well, they're gonna put me in quarantine. I don't want to be in quarantine. It's like, well, it's not about you, lady. It's not. It's about everybody else. If you don't go into quarantine because you don't tell the truth about your condition or what it might be, well, then they might not run the tests they need to figure out if it's coronavirus, and you might go on infecting tons and tons of people, and that is what exacerbates the whole situation. So irrational people is what you're going to see a lot, and they are much more prone to violence. That's one of the key things. I mean, just a few days ago, I saw a video of, I think it was in Australia, a bunch of women fighting over toilet paper in a supermarket. Yesterday, a girl pulled a knife over toilet paper. So you can expect people to be more easily in a state of mind where they get aggressive. Now, you yourself are also likely to be more aggressive because of all the stress that you encounter. So check yourself too, of course. And that brings us to another point, which is crowds and when you're out about in public spaces. So you can, again, expect people to be stressed out. So, and here's a fun game you can play right now. Notice the reactions when somebody coughs or sneezes. See what happens. The main thing is that stressed out people are one thing, but stressed out groups are worse. So if you're in a public space, it doesn't take much for things to, at the very least, get very uncomfortable or get totally out of hand. For instance, recently there was another incident. Unfortunately, also in Australia, was a woman in a train sitting in front of a guy, and she coughed. And we don't see the beginning of the incident, but this argument starts where he says to her that he gets upset because she didn't cough into her hand or into a tissue or whatever, and she's like, well, I coughed inside my mouth. I didn't open my mouth, and he says, They start insulting each other very quickly, and it doesn't get violent, but you can see clearly that there's this incident brewing. Well, give it a few more weeks and the situation a lot worse, and see what happens then. So this whole situation can escalate very rapidly as people get more and more stressed out and just become less and less reasonable. So expect that. And that brings me to the next safety tip. There are likely to be desperate people. Maybe not necessarily right now, but give it some time. Hopefully things don't turn out too bad for where you live, but it's bound to happen. And those are likely to be people who didn't prepare for this. They're completely lost because their worldview is now shattered. That comfortable first world that they thought they lived in is now gone. And all of a sudden, they don't have a coping mechanism. Those kind of people can be desperate and do desperate things. So, as always, be aware of your surroundings. Be alert. Don't just assume the best. And even if you want to help somebody, don't just assume that you're safe because you mean well. Just be careful, as you always should be. And then I'm going to leave you with one more thing, and that is a safety tip that I have from one of my articles. This is actually my most successful article on my blog of all time, and it's been almost 7 years now since I wrote it. It's called Self-Defense Tips for Men, 8 Self-Defense Tips for Men. I'll put a link in the show notes. The last safety tip that I give there is have a mission. You have to have a mission. You can write it yourself. You can do whatever you like with it, but you have to have a mission that you stick to. And that makes a lot of decisions so much easier to do if you have a goal you work through every day. I'm going to give you mine. I've shared it publicly so many times, but here it is. My mission is this. Every time I leave the house, my mission is to return to my loved ones safely and unharmed so I can live a long and happy life with them. That's it. It's not difficult, but sticking to the mission can be difficult. I get just as annoyed as everybody else when somebody cuts me off in traffic. I want to honk my horn. I want to get all angry about it, but that doesn't help my mission at all. Quite on the contrary, that puts me in harm's way, in particular given how crazy Belgian traffic is. So when times are stressful, when things like the coronavirus are happening, you have to develop a mission. Have a mission. It doesn't have to be the same as mine, but have something that guides you in your actions and in your decisions. And then you just basically, anytime you're about to do something, you just check with your mission. Is this going to bring me closer to the goal of my mission or take me away from it? And if it takes you away from that goal, maybe don't do it. Or at the very least, know what you're doing, what you're getting yourself into. My overall point that I want to leave you with this is that in times of crisis like this, and again, I really hope wherever you are that you are in a few months listening to this and say like, that Wim guy was so full of it. It wasn't as bad here. We had that one covered. I really hope that that's how it ends up. I would love to be completely wrong about everything I just said. I'm afraid I'm not, but I really hope I am. But here's my point. So when we are in crisis situations like we are here, doesn't matter if it's coronavirus or like a huge earthquake or a flood or something like that. But this one is really big because it's global. In those times, the best and the worst of humanity is going to come through. So what I would suggest is you make a decision to be a part of the best. That doesn't mean that you just give your stuff away to everybody who comes knocking, but it means that you don't add to the chaos. You don't spread rumors, you stay calm, you don't fly off the handle with people all over the place. You try to be a force for good so that the more people that do that, the less the chaos gets a chance to actually hurt you and your loved ones. So that is what I plan on doing. I hope you can take up a similar mindset. And because we're going to have to get through this together anyway. I mean, I think this is one of the things that has the potential to get so big that it's going to dominate whatever we do for the next few months. I hope I'm wrong, but from what I'm seeing, it looks like it's going to be pretty big. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. Podcast ran a lot longer than I thought it would, but try to give you guys some context and some thoughts, and hopefully that you find that helpful. A bunch of the stuff I mentioned, go to wimsblog.com/46, number 46. You'll find the links there. You want to support the show? That would be awesome. Go to patreon.com/Wim Demeere, my name. And in the meantime, everybody be safe out there, and I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Wim Demeere podcast. For more information, go to www.wimsblog.com.